Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nationals daily live stream. I'm Craig Megan, and I'm joined with my colleague Judith Duffy to discuss what we're working on today, what the big news today is, just a day before the council elections in Scotland. Why don't we kick off with the front page? What have we got today, Judith?
Yeah, sure. Well, obviously, it is the last day before the election kicks off tomorrow, which seems like unbelievable. It seems like only a minute ago it was January, but here we are about to go to the polls again. On the front page today, we have the big interview with the First Minister. So we have the National here today. And it's basically, our correspondent, Abby Garson-Crosby, sat down on the SNP bus and had a good chat through with Nicola Sturgeon about the issues which they're focusing on for the local elections. So it's well worth the read, and some interesting stuff in it. The kind of cost of living crisis is obviously a big message, and the whole idea of sending a message to Boris Johnson just in terms of the discuss over Partygate again is something that she's really urging voters to do. And then it goes on to talk a bit about the obviously preparations for independence and what's happening with that. So she very much gives signals that preparations are in track and on progress. But I guess we'll have to wait and see until after the council elections exactly what that's going to look like. She didn't give too much detail on when things might progress. So I think that's her argument, that she's going to wait until the council elections are over, get them out the way, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so it's the last day before the council elections, and we've got FMQs as well. Do you expect that to be a big part of FMQs today?
I think so. Obviously, the parties will be out in the campaign trail today as well, and it'll be the day for the big photo opportunities and everything like that. So I think we'll see a bit of that. I guess at FMQs, things might come up like the issue around the kind of ferry story, and I guess Nicola Sturgeon will be facing a grilling in that. So I don't know, what else do you think might come up at FMQs? Is there anything you've got on the radar that things might happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, I agree with you. I think it'll be, a lot of it will be the ferries sort of ongoing scandal and any new lines on that, as well as just the last minute plea for the council elections, I guess. I mean, as you said, they'll all be in Edinburgh campaigning. And I think Abby spoke with Nicola Sturgeon a little bit about that, about the council elections and the cost of living crisis. And obviously comes as, that panel-based poll, I think it was by the Sunday Times, showed the Tories slipping into third place, Labour overtaking them. I think they were on 24%, while the Tories were on 21%.
Absolutely. And there was actually another poll out today as well. I think it was a Savanta Comres one, which again shows a similar picture. So this is on Holyrood voting intentions, but that points to Labour having the biggest lead over the Tories in Scotland since 2015, which is quite interesting. But the SNP maintaining a comfortable lead in that poll as well. So it's kind of interesting that this picture is emerging of Labour very much in second place. And I think it will be a big disappointment if that doesn't happen, because there has been that build up and that anticipation that, they are going to overtake the Tories. So it'd be interesting to see what the outcome is, even though local elections are obviously often about local issues, then there are very much wider issues at this election. So I think that'll be definitely one of the biggest one in Scotland. So
yeah, and there were definitely some accusations by some on the SNP side that the Tories may be, worrying about their council election strategy, sort of fielding out sort of Ruth Davidson. She's been sort of increasingly prominent on the Tory social media side of things. Looking through the past few days of their Twitter feed, it was, it wasn't much Ruth Davidson, and then all of a sudden the past 2 days, she's been out campaigning. It's been full of that on social media. So maybe a last sort of ditch effort to take back what they can.
I think that's a real sign of panic, isn't it, when they bring out Ruth Davidson and they suddenly realise that they're slipping behind and need to do something to try and get that vote up. So yeah, absolutely. The issue of the council elections is also our last focus on local elections in the paper today. So Hamish Morrison is having a look at the Shetland Islands. So that completes the 32. All 32 are now in the website. So you can go in and have a look and browse and see what the different individual issues are affecting different areas, which I think has been really interesting. It's been really interesting to do some of them. And it definitely adds an element to the local elections. If you're not sure about what's going on in one particular area, then you can dive in and see, what the big issues there are. I did one on Orkney Islands, actually, which was really interesting because it demonstrates the difference there is between island politics and mainland politics. So in Orkney, as in Shetland, it's independents which make up the biggest majority in the council, and party politics really doesn't play into it. So it's really interesting to see the difference between it, although on Orkney, they've got a group of Greens who are trying to pave the way for more party politics. So that'll be one to watch when the vote finishes tomorrow.
Yeah, definitely. And are there any sort of major upsets that you're sort of keen to look out for just in any council in Scotland?
I mean, I think obviously the kind of big one will be Glasgow and what happens there. So I've heard kind of varying predictions on that, whether the SNP will hang on, whether Labour will do enough to actually overtake. So I think that's one that's on most people's radar as a sign of the times. But whether that's more to do with very local issues as opposed to wider national issues, I think that will play out in the city there. So what about yourself? Is there any ones that you think are particularly worth watching?
Yeah, I mean, well, I live in Glasgow myself, so I've been, paying keen attention to that. Obviously, the Tories have been, leading a lot of their campaign on sort of clean up Glasgow and the bins, which is a big issue for many voters. Obviously, people throughout Scotland do vote on union lines, that is a thing, but people also vote on these big issues such as bin collection and clean streets, and the Tories have been keen to sort of capitalise on that, I think. So it will be interesting to see if the SNP can maintain their sort of minority status as the leader in the local council. I mean, the leader has said, Susan Atkinson, that she will resign if they lose. So that'll be, there as well. And so what else are you sort of working on today, Judith?
Yeah, I'm just having a look around to see what's happening today. So, but one thing that did catch my eye in Holyrood today is the first ever debate on the benefits of walking, which is quite a quirky one. So I just thought that was quite interesting in the context of during lockdown, everybody was out walking. It was the only thing you could do, then. And actually, it was quite a kind of nice time to be walking, I felt, because you were out, there's much less traffic about, you weren't battling with cars and exhaust fumes. And now everything's pretty much gone back to normal. I just wonder how many people have kind of kept that habit up, or whether, there's lots of people that have, you just kind of see less people out walking and kind of being able to maybe enjoy going out for a walk, busyness of life and everything like that. So I think it's really interesting that, there was that big, walking drive that happened during lockdown almost, and now it's kind of fallen away. So I'd certainly be interested to see any statistics actually on how many people have kept that habit up, or whether it was just something that happened during the pandemic. I mean, obviously it wasn't great because it was the only thing that you could do to get out of the house practically. So it was out of necessity more than want. But yeah, I think that's a kind of interesting one and something just a bit different that will come up in Holyrood today.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I've been speaking to a few host families in Scotland who are sponsoring Ukrainians, and it's pretty much the same thing from sort of every family I speak to myself, just the sort of bureaucracy. And I think one of the families that I spoke to called it a dysfunctional octopus in terms of the UK government's strategy. And in terms of how that aligns with the Scottish government, and then the local council also has a lot of input in this. And yeah, there's been so many calls for the visa system to be completely scrapped and changed. Obviously, the UK is quite unique to not offer sort of visa-free access for Ukrainians in Europe. And what I've heard from talking to families who have helped sponsor Ukrainians is that you really have to fight, their corner. One person, Varvara, I spoke to, she was rejected for universal credit on the basis that she was a student, even though her student, her university isn't really functioning right now, and many people, their university might not exist. So there's issues like that. There's issues such as if people can apply for benefits, like, she's not getting universal credit, but she just, got in touch with me the other day to say that she can now vote. So it's a bit, that's, I think, what, the person I was speaking to, Keith MacLeod, when he called it a dysfunctional octopus, it's, in some areas, it's really handy. You can get your bank, you can get your GP sorted very fast. But then in other areas, it seems like it can take quite a long time, particularly the visas, which has been a struggle for most people. Yeah. And on a sort of lighter note, I hopefully later today speaking to a Japanese man who's cycling around the world, and he's currently in Scotland. I think he might have started in Greece, and now he's here in Scotland. And he chapped on. We found out about this because he basically just chapped on one of our readers' doors, just to ask for some water, and he ended up making him some soup, and then they got talking. And yeah, I guess that's where he is. So very interesting story, quite sweet. I saw that he just tried his first roll in brown sauce and square sausage, so he seemed to like that. So I think all was going well, but he doesn't really have anywhere to stay or anything. He just sort of camps as he goes. So yeah,
Amazing adventure. I look forward to reading about that. Absolutely.
yeah,
Something a bit different from politics and elections. So
yeah, definitely. And another cultural one there's a new sort of program called Unfair, made by Channel 4, which is filmed in Scotland. It's about this woman who moves into a showman's yard in the East End. And that's quite an interesting one. Hoping to speak to the writer either today or tomorrow. It's it's good to see a production made in Scotland, made in the East End of Glasgow. Wee bit of bias because that's where I'm from, but yeah. So a few different ones. Ukraine one and then some culture ones as well. But there'll be lots of politics today as well, with it being the last day before the council election, and then FMQs on top of that.
Yeah, so it was always good to have that mix, isn't it? Though it's have a mix of politics and kind of more lighthearted stuff to read. So yeah, absolutely, that'll be great to read that tomorrow.
Definitely. And is there anything in the news that you're keen to keep an eye on today, or sort of in the next few days?
I mean, I really think it's going to be dominated by the elections, so obviously that will be the big issue. And it's not obviously just about in Scotland. There's obviously kind of wider issues that will play out across the UK. So it'll be interesting to see how much Partygate does damage the Tories' vote across the UK and not just in Scotland. There was an interesting poll out yesterday in which it seemed to suggest that around just over 10% of people who would vote Tory at the next election didn't actually care whether they thought Boris Johnson was a rogue, they'd still vote for him anyway. So I don't think it's quite so simple as you might think in terms of the kind of how much the scandal might impact him. And there's also obviously the issue of Northern Ireland, and Sinn Féin predicted to overtake as the biggest party for the first time ever. And that'll be a really interesting one to watch as well, in terms of both in the short term, whether a power sharing administration can then be formed afterwards, and in the long term, and whether that opens the door to a united Ireland. So these are local elections, but there's obviously a lot more wider issues to come out of them, which will be really interesting to watch.
If the Tories don't do well across the UK, do you think, how much pressure will that add to Boris Johnson over Partygate, and how much pressure in turn do you think that'll add to Douglas Ross, who obviously, called for him to resign and then later on retracted that?
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, I think if they don't do well in Scotland, that'll be huge pressure on Douglas Ross. He's already made that U-turn blunder, and whether his party will then be thinking, his time is up, is something that'll be interesting to see. And in case of Boris Johnson, again, it's very much depends on what his party want. Whether MPs will then start to think, well, maybe it's my time to put a letter into the 1922 committee, or whether they'll be thinking, well, who else have we got at the moment? So I don't think it will be, necessarily big drastic impact, but it might be something that just adds another chipping away at both the leadership. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see from that.
Yeah, I think there's lots of I guess it's always the same with an election. There's just lots of things that can happen, that can go wrong, that can go right, and it'll be very interesting to see who comes out on top between Labour and the Tories in Scotland, and then what that'll do for the leadership of both Anna Sarwar, Douglas Ross, and Boris Johnson as well.
Absolutely, it's certainly going to be a busy few days. So, but you can keep up with all the news at national.scot. So, and yeah, anybody do send us your comments or feedback. We're always interested to hear what you think and what you want to see covered. So, do get in touch.
Sounds great.